Leopards are hard enough to spot in Yala National Park under normal circumstances, but to see one locked in a showdown with a porcupine, well, that's the sort of encounter that most photographers only dream of, and I was certainly lucky enough to be there with my camera ready to catch the action. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Processing the World. Now, Yala National Park is one of Sri Lanka's crown jewels, located on the southeast coast of the island. It stretches across more than 1,200 square kilometres of dry forest, there's grassland, rocky outcrops and quite a few lagoons. Now the park is home to elephants, crocodiles, sloth bears, jackals, buffalo, countless bird species, and most famously, it's one of the highest densities of leopards anywhere in the world, although you do have to be lucky still to be able to spot one. Now, entry to the park costs around $25 to $30 per person, but you can't self-drive. You'll need to book a safari with a licensed operator, and I'll link the tour I used in the description below. To get the best chance of seeing wildlife, you join the queue at the park gates before sunrise, lining up alongside dozens of other jeeps in a long line waiting for the gates. Now, when those gates do swing open, it's a race into the wilderness, and every photographer and guide is hoping for that one extraordinary sighting, as you all split up and take different paths. Now, on this particular morning safari, I was shooting with the Canon R5 and the RF 100 to 500mm lens. I had the camera set to servo autofocus with animal eye detections selected, and I had the high-speed drive on. Now, it turned out to be the perfect setup, because what unfolded in front of us was over in less than 20 to 25 seconds, and it was a fascinating encounter. So let's head into Lightroom, and I'll talk you through the encounter first of all, and then we'll go into the image processing mode.
Now, as mentioned previously, this was an encounter that was over within about 20 seconds, if that. And you are very, very lucky, and you can consider yourself charmed if you do actually manage to spot a leopard in Yala National Park. So for this to happen and to get this interesting interaction was just absolutely wonderful on the day. Luckily, I already had the camera set to the high-speed drive, so I'll take you through what actually happened purely for interest's sake before we actually get to the processing the image. Now, we stopped, the truck stopped, the driver sensed something, I guess, but he saw the porcupine come running around the corner. And the leopard was clearly intent on following the porcupine to see that if it was possible to make a meal of this very dangerous meal, I would think. A very difficult thing to capture and eat. But anyway, the leopard, the driver had said was a she, started walking towards the porcupine and had been shadowing it for some while. The porcupine, looking nervous, keeps turning an eye to see where the leopard actually is. As you can see from this shot, she's just turning her head, or he's just turning his head to check on where the leopard is. The leopard still thinking about it, and rightly so. Those quills are quite fearsome, and I've since learned afterwards that they do oftentimes have quills. Leopards are found with quills in their face and in their paws. But she's still thinking about it. She's still considering this might be a meal, so she's coming closer, and as you can see, she's getting more intent. As she moves closer, she decides, the porcupine decides that the porcupine decides he's had enough, and he starts backing into the leopard with quills aimed in the leopard's direction. As you can see, the leopard is sort of thinking about it, and the tail goes up, and the porcupine turns, still looking nervous. I must say, in this image, I love the porcupine's mohawk quiff there on the back of its head. The leopard sees this as an insult, really, and starts to take a swipe, it looks like, and just stops short of getting a quill in the paw there as the porcupine backs up once again. The chase resumes, and the porcupine's keeping a close eye. The leopard is looking even more intent now. Keeps coming towards the truck, which, of course, as you can imagine, was fascinating and wonderful for the photographers on the truck. I was really relying on the R5's amazing animal eye focus capabilities and the high-speed drive. As the porcupine kept coming closer and closer, the leopard's shadowing and starts to think about going in for another strike. You might notice at this point my card started buffering for a half second, so I missed the next couple of frames until the leopard moved into another position where it was about to strike. It went for it again, just missing the quills. And I think at this point, the leopard decided, well, this is a bit too dangerous for me. I've had enough. So she decided she'd had enough and started to walk away. The porcupine beat a hasty retreat back to the bush, sensibly. And as the leopard was walking away, she just turned to look at us, the photographers in the truck. And it's this image, I think, number 276 or 277, that I'm going to process. But just to finish off, here she's still looking at us and decides to give up in disgust. So that's the series of images that I captured showing some, I think, fascinating animal behavior. And these are all unprocessed raw files. So let's see what we can bring out. So we're going to come back to, I think it's number 276 that I'm interested in. Let's go back here. Yeah, 276 is the one I want to process. Let's take that over to the Develop tab. As mentioned, Canon R5 raw file. Because you're using a high-resolution camera like the R5, you can still crop in. Those wonderful 45 megapixels do allow a good degree of cropping. So that's the very first thing I'm going to do. So we select the crop tool and we just crop in. I'm holding down the option Alt key to keep it as a keep the crop ratio where I want it to match the original image. And I'm going to crop in. I'm kind of putting the animals at both sections of the thirds there with perhaps a tiny bit more room this way, because obviously the leopard is walking to the left. I think that will do quite nicely. A little bit tighter maybe. That'll do quite nicely. Anyway, so having cropped, the next thing that I want to do is, if it were a landscape, I normally leave the landscape, the temperature until the end, because changes I make to sky, changes I make to contrast can affect my color perception. In this instance, we pretty much know exactly what we want here. We want it to get rid of that blue tinge that affects the image from the animals being in the shade. And so I'm going to select my little white balance tool and my little eyedropper, select something in the image that I know should be white. So it could be the leopard's fur, or it could be in this instance, I'm going to select the porcupine quill. Just click that, and you can see that instantly we get a nice, much more accurate, true to the eye color temperature. So I'm pretty happy with that. I might just bring it up a little bit higher to give it a little more warmth, give the image a little bit more warmth. Now, the next thing that I want to do, it's actually a reasonably well-exposed image because it was in shade as it is. You can see that there's a lack of true blacks and a lack of true whites in the histogram. So let's stretch that out and increase the contrast in the image using the contrast slider. And it's already really bringing the image to life that much more. So I'm going to bring up a fair bit of contrast here, keeping an eye on my histogram. I'm not clipping anything. I'm not really going to touch the highlights here. I mean, I may use a gradient to just darken the foreground, but I don't really need to touch the highlights here. If I bring up the shadows, it would bring up the shadows in the background slightly. That could work, but remember the subject focus really I want is on the leopard. So I'm not going to do that in this instance. I am going to push my whites up a little bit. It gives me a little bit more contrast, and drop back my blacks a little bit too. That's not looking too bad. Having done that, I think I might actually add a little bit of clarity to the image, so a little bit of mid-tone contrast. So just going to bring that up just to give the image, I know I say it in every video, but just that little bit more crunch. So we're just adding a little bit more mid-tone contrast in the image. And that's probably a little bit too much, around about 30 points on the slider there. Let's just see how far we've come. So you can see already that's looking like a much, much stronger image. I will add a little bit of dehaze. We were at distance, as you can see from the crop. I had the 500mm lens at the full 500mm end of the zoom range. So I'll add about 5 points of dehaze. Now, vibrance and saturation, definitely I want to increase the vibrance on this image. I'm going to saturate the undersaturated colors. So I'll give it around about 15-20 points of vibrance. So having adjusted the vibrance, I'm just going to add about 5 points of global saturation overall. I think that makes the image look pretty good. It's probably looking a little bit crunchy in the background area here. Now, I am going to denoise the image, but it's looking a little bit crunchy now for my liking, so I will back off on the clarity. And yeah, that's probably looking better, actually. So that's not bad. So we're going to come down to detail. And this was shot at ISO 2000 in order to keep my shutter speed high at a 6/40th of a second. So I'm going to add some denoising to this, and it will just denoise the image. But that's just taken the noise out of the image, which makes it a much smoother background, and I'm happy with that. Now, having denoised it, I do want to add some sharpening. So we're going to select the masking slider, add the Option or Alt key on the keyboard, and just drag across to the right. Obviously, the white is where it's going to be sharpened, black is where it won't be sharpened, and so I'm looking at the white on the leopard there. So that's about right. Bring up my sharpening to around about 80 to 90 points, and that gives me a good sharpening output for this image if I'm going to web, and if I want to take it to a larger print, then I can add more sharpening if I deem it necessary. Having denoised and sharpened the image, we're just going to come down to lens corrections, and I'm going to remove the chromatic aberration within the image. Not that there is any, but it doesn't hurt to have that little box checked. And enable the profile corrections. And that just allows Adobe to basically have a look at the profile of the lens and correct for any what it perceives as inherent flaws within that lens. Now, that's pretty good. I think we're pretty close to finished on the image. The last thing I will do is I am going to add a little bit of vignetting on the global adjustments just to draw the eye in that little bit more to the leopard. And having done that, I'm just going to mask the leopard as my final part of this process. So click on the masking tab, click on the subject, and you'll see that it's selected the leopard and the porcupine. I'll leave it on the porcupine for the moment. I can always, if I don't like the effect, I can always brush it away. But I don't want the effect applied this area of the leopard's tail and just underneath the belly here. So I'm going to subtract using a brush, bring that into the image, and I've got a reasonably large brush. So just using the square bracket key on the keyboard, I'm just going to make that brush smaller just to subtract from the animal there, and in between the legs there, and just in between the tail here. Just get rid of before I even apply the adjustments. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, so what I want to do here is just increase the exposure very slightly, 5 points or so here on the animal. And I definitely want to increase the shadows. Now look at the body. So I'm increasing the shadows to around about 60 to 70 points. But if you look at the body here, it's much brighter than it was. And that's really where I'm interested in brightening it. So just bring that up to 60, maybe even 70 points. Let's just have a look at that mask. So before, after. I think I might remove it from the porcupine. I don't want it on that, but I do like it on the body of the leopard. So that's pretty good. I'm going to remove it from the face of the leopard as well, but I'm quite happy with that otherwise. So let's just push up the whites very slightly, bring down the blacks a little bit more. And I'm going to add a little bit of clarity to the leopard as well. So that's pretty good. It's probably going to be imperceptible, to be honest with you, on this YouTube video, but that's better. You can see the difference there. I don't want it on the leopard's face. I don't want it on the porcupine. So again, subtract, use the brush, and I'm just going to brush away, square bracket, right-hand square bracket to remove it from the porcupine. Don't need it on that. And I don't want it on her face. So just here. So that removes it from there. Let's go back to the overall. And now if you come back to the final finished image, let's just do the before and after. If I just press down on the eye icon on the basic tab, you can see that's before and this is after. So we've gone from a very blue, quite flat image to a beautiful animal portrait, in my opinion. Lastly, I might add that gradient, that last gradient. So we're going to create a linear gradient. And all I'm really interested in doing here is just drawing the eye away from some of this bright area. So just drop the exposure on that. And I think that brings it in quite nicely to the leopard. Let's take a look at the overall again. This is the final before and after. Before and after. Yeah, I think that finishes that image nicely.
And there you have it, the before and the after. Now, if you're planning a trip to Yala National Park, here are 5 tips that will help you make the most of your visit. Now, first of all, the best time to visit is undoubtedly in the dry season, from February through to July. And this is when the animals gather at the water holes, making sightings much more likely. The best time to see leopards is at dawn and at dusk. Leopards are far more active in the cooler hours, and your guides will obviously do all they can to find these beautiful cats, constantly scanning the ground for signs that they've recently passed by or been somewhere in the area. And indeed, we saw quite a few paw prints before we actually got to see the leopard. Where to stay, I've linked 3 excellent accommodation options in the description below, from budget-friendly to luxury lodges. Now, while at your lodge, keep your eyes peeled and keep your camera close at hand, as you can often spot beautiful bird life from the pool bar. Now, as far as photography gear is concerned, I would recommend bringing along a long lens, something that goes up to 400 or 500 millimeters is ideal, but I also strongly recommend packing a mid-range zoom, such as a 24 to 105 millimeter. Elephants, buffalo, and other large animals often come right up to the Jeep, and you'll definitely want that wider perspective. Now, the last tip, it sounds obvious to say, but be patient. But also, always be ready, because wildlife encounters often happen in an instant. Keep your cameras set for action and in your hands when you're driving. Keep continuous autofocus and the fast burst mode on, which will really make all the difference between missing or capturing the action if you come across something such as this. Now, check you have a clear card or enough storage before leaving your hotel, and always have your spare batteries within reach, not hidden away at the bottom of your backpack, something I learned from experience. So that's it for this episode of Processing the World. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Yala National Park, hit the like button, subscribe for more travel and photography stories, and let me know in the comments down below if Sri Lanka is on your photography bucket list. And again, I'm going to suggest very strongly that it really should be. Until next time, keep exploring, keep shooting, and I'll see you in the next video.